So I'm Sierra Frost, if you don't know that already. Some of you might know me well and others maybe have never met me at all yet, which is really exciting. And welcome to Awkward Communication 101, 5 steps to support your weird loved ones, even if you are the weird loved one like me. I'm not going to teach you how to Mike Tyson somebody or bite their ear today. Hey Jess, welcome. But the first thing I want to talk to you guys about is I want to ask you a question. So while I'm waiting for other people to get on and we're getting settled, the question is, what communication topic is most difficult for you lately? So that might be finances, it might be adverse experiences, it could be abuse, it could be specific emotions like talking about anger or talking about romance or talking about sadness. It could be your career or your job. What communication topic is most difficult? And what type of relationship is it difficult in? So is it a conversation happening in your marriage or with your significant other? Is it with a family member? Is it with coworkers? Is it with friends? Maybe it's even with yourself. So those are the two questions. What communication topic is most difficult? And what type of relationship is it most difficult in? Cool, and I typed them into the comments as well in case that's helpful. So Beth says abuse, talking about it with your family. That makes complete sense to me. Boundaries. Boundaries are totally a tough one for people. And I did do a webinar before about boundaries. If you haven't gotten that, shoot me a message with your email and I'll make sure you get the link to it. And also think about when you are receiving the information too, because really what we're talking about today is supporting other people, which will help you support yourself in talking to other people. But when people come to you with something that maybe feels awkward or uncomfortable, and maybe you don't know what to say, and when we're talking today, first we're going to talk about different roles. And so when I say giver, I'm going to use the word giver a lot. And when I say giver, that means the person responding. And the receiver is going to be the person who brought up the topic. And then the giver is responding back to them. So the giver is the person who's communicating to the person who brought up the topic. And I'll remind you of that throughout as we're talking. I'm also going to, at the end, I'm going to do some laser coaching with you if you want. So be thinking throughout, if you're feeling like there's something coming up and you want to start to dive into it in like 15 minutes or something, I will offer that at the end. And I'm going to talk to you guys about coaching packages as well if it's something that you want to dive deeper into after our conversation today. So the first thing I want to talk about is 3 different styles of communicating. And I have given them names, kind of like archetypes, if you will, about what is going on. So the first style is the projector. This is the person who talks about their experience. So whatever is happening for the giver is assigned to the receiver. For example, if someone is talking to me about their mom who is diagnosed with breast cancer, and then I start talking about the time my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, it's me projecting my experience onto that person. And the purpose of that, what we want when we do that communication style, is we're trying to validate and empathize with somebody else. And so with all three of these styles, we're not coming from a space of wanting to do harm or not communicate well. It just, the wires get crossed and we get confused about what to do. And so put in the comments if this has ever happened to you, where you are talking about something and you really just want the person to listen to you and to validate your feelings, and then they suddenly maybe start talking about their own experience and what that was like for them. And the message that is received usually when we do that is that the receiver is less important than the person communicating or the giver. So even though my intention is to validate and empathize with somebody else, what happens when I start talking about myself is it sends the message indirectly that that person's experience is not valid, or they might receive the message that I don't care about their experience, or I'm not willing to listen to them. So that's what happens. And what that sounds like could be, I know exactly how you feel because I had a flat tire on the highway once and blah, 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 this is what happened. And the example I already used was when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, I moved back home to be with her because it felt so hard to be far away. So now that person might even be thinking that I'm telling them that the right thing to do is to move back home with your mom because that's what I did. And so that's the first style, the projector. And as you guys are listening, leave comments because I can't see them all right now. And so I'll get back to them when I get in there. So just type them in there so that they're there waiting for me. And an example of this, with all of these, I'm going to use examples that come directly from my family. I'm not going to use names, but I'm going to tell you these are real life experiences that I have had. And they're all going to be related for me to childhood abuse. And one of the reasons is because childhood abuse, and specifically childhood sexual abuse, is a really uncomfortable topic for people. It's also Sexual Assault Awareness Month in April. So that's part of the reason why we're here having this webinar. It's also one of the examples that was shared, is talking about abuse with your family. What is that like? So I have a family member who is a projector style communicator. And that family member has told me things about my experience with all good intentions, saying things like, it was evil, it's unimaginable, it's unbelievable, it's horrific, what a nightmare, I can't believe anyone would do that, I can't imagine how you would feel, it must be awful and horrible. And when that person communicates to me about the abuse I experienced that way, I know this isn't her intention, but the message that I get is that part of my life and part of myself is evil and horrific and unbelievable and unimaginable. And I don't feel that way about my experience. So when she tells me those things, I feel like, am I wrong to not feel that way about my experience? Is this what I should be feeling right now? Could I be honest and let them know that I don't feel that way? Would they be able to accept that? Or do they even want to know about what my experience is? Or do they just want to tell me about how they feel about it? So that's the projector. I'm going to check in on comments or questions. The second style is the, wait for it, exploder. This style, usually they feel a sense of responsibility or guilt about the topic, and they're not sure how to work through their own feelings. And so they kind of sit there in silence in those feelings, a little bit frozen and feeling shameful. And then it builds up and it builds up. And then one day they just suddenly erupt. And that person wants to help make the situation better and save another person from pain, because it's uncomfortable when people come to us and they tell us that they are experiencing something that is painful. That's hard for us to sit there and watch people that we love experience pain, and we want to help and we want to serve them so that they don't have to experience those things anymore. However, it's important to understand that the only person that can really change or save anybody from pain is the person themselves. And so this style might talk about the topic, but it sounds blaming. It might send the message that the person talking about the topic is harming the receiver because it makes them feel guilty or shameful about it, and so we shouldn't talk about it. It oftentimes will send the message of staying silent and avoiding the topic completely. And that what it might sound like is complete silence and then some form of explosion where this style is like, well, do you hate me now? Or is this all my fault? Or they will start to justify, and they don't even know that they're doing this probably, but they'll start to justify their behavior. So, well, I didn't show up to your college graduation, but I was there for your birth, and I was there for your first basketball game, or whatever it is, when in reality, we know that your birth or your first basketball game doesn't have anything to do with your college graduation and maybe wanting to talk about why that person wasn't there and that it was important to you. So the example directly from my life is a family member that felt pretty guilty and shameful about their role. And it's important to recognize that I am very much aware, and this is something I encourage you guys to adopt as well if you haven't already, that everyone is doing the best they can with the resources that they have. And that includes communication resources. So everyone is responding to us in the very best way that they know how. And then when they learn better, they do better. And so this person, this family member of mine, was pretty silent about my experience being abused. And then one day they said to me, well, I think that you hate me. And I was shocked because I was just imagining how intense that would feel to believe that a family member hates you and how long that person had been believing that without asking me, and how guilty and how shameful that must have felt for them. So because we feel defensive and shameful about our actions, we avoid talking about them, which eventually just builds up inside of us and creates disease and discomfort. And one day we end up exploding and we end up resenting people, or we end up having these beliefs that aren't true, but we believe them for years until finally we say something to clarify them. And the third style is the one-timer. This person is usually taken off guard by a topic. They weren't like maybe planning the conversation, or it just came up and it wasn't known before the topic or the conversation started. So they kind of go into this survival mode and they survive the one conversation, and then they completely avoid the topic, or they completely avoid the person entirely from that point on. And that's usually from a feeling of being scared of saying or doing the wrong thing. And so we completely avoid any conversation that could possibly have to do with the topic, or we stop talking to the person because that topic might come up again and I still don't know what to say, right? And then sometimes this is when we say things that we think the other person wants to hear. So I might say something like, I totally hear that your car broke down and you won't have it for 4 weeks until it's fixed. You can just borrow my car and use it every single day because that will make your life easier. Well, in the meantime, I actually need my car to go to work, and that's not a realistic thing that I can do, but it's because I think the other person wants to hear that I'm just going to say it. So I'm just saying whatever I can to diffuse the awkward situation and to get back into a normal conversation, right? And the message that sends, because we can't follow through with those things, and then the person disappears, at first it feels kind of relieving, like, oh, I'm not alone. This person is here with me, this one-timer is here with me, they're willing to help me, but then suddenly the one-timer doesn't show up anymore for the conversation, isn't there emotionally to support them, isn't there physically to support them. And then that creates a message of betrayal or shame, or that we're not worth someone's time or energy. It's really invalidating for us. So what that might sound like is, I'm so sorry this is happening. And what happens when we apologize for something that we didn't do is we attach ourselves to the issue. So if I apologize for, and this isn't even conscious, if I apologize that your car broke down, subconsciously in your brain is going to go, oh, they apologized for that, so they must have been part of the reason why my car broke down. And this, if you're a person who experiences anxiety, that means that now that person is like a representative of anxiety on a very subconscious level. Now, when you see that person or you hear of that person, you might start to feel anxiety and you don't even know why. It's because your subconscious brain has made that attachment. This one's a funny one. I will do absolutely anything to be there for you, even find a genetic formula to create a white unicorn Pegasus that flies over Saturn to deliver you magic space rocks to cure your illness. So I totally exaggerated there, and hopefully you're laughing, but that's what we do. We just decide that we can save someone or fix someone because we don't want them to feel uncomfortable. And so we just promise the most outrageous things that we really can't follow through on. And in the end, that creates mistrust and betrayal, and it's not going to be helpful or sustainable in a relationship at all. Someone might say, I will definitely be here for you through this whole process, and then suddenly they disappear. So it's really inconsistent. When people are inconsistent in their communication, that's really difficult. And we're going to talk more about that later. That sounds really tough. And then they'll completely change the subject. So they'll be like, yeah, I hear that happened. And did you see the hockey game last night? Or did you know that it's snowing and it's April? And that is really shaming. That sends the message that something about our experience is wrong and we shouldn't talk about it anymore. The example that I have from my life is a family member. When I decided to talk about the abuse that I experienced, I told one of my family members, and they were really supportive and said some of these things, and then they promised me that they would be there for another conversation that I was going to have with my family, no matter what time it was, whenever I called them, that they would be there, and then they weren't. So when I called them, they didn't answer, and then they didn't bring up the topic again. So they were there once and then kind of disappeared. And then I felt like, gosh, I don't know if this person really does care about this, or maybe they don't want to talk about it with me, or maybe they're not ready. I don't really know. And I wasn't sure that I could ever bring up the topic with them again. And so that felt pretty uncomfortable for me. So those are the 3 communication styles that do not work. Let me go through them one more time. So the projector, person who decides that everyone's experience is the same as theirs. The wait for it exploder, the person that might have their own emotions with it and then suddenly allows it to build up and explodes. Or the one-timer, the person who says anything to get out of the conversation and then never comes back to it. And again, I really want to stress this, that none of these communication styles are out of intention to harm or intention to send the messages that they do. They just happen because we aren't sure what to do better, which is why we are here. They also happen because those are the conversations or the communication that is modeled for us. So a lot of times, maybe our family or the people that we knew at an early stage of life, or as a young adult communicated this way, the people we were in relationships with at the beginning of our lives, they had these styles, and so we observed them and then we adopted them without even thinking about it. So we're going to move on into the 4 C's of communication. And these are the roots of communication. So before we get into the 5 steps, it's really important that these are things that we need to understand, and they could be mindsets, they could be value systems that are important to communicate well. And I should say, today, we're going to talk about communication, but I could talk to you about communication for like weeks and months at a time, right? So we are kind of skimming the surface. And if you feel like, gosh, this is really helpful, and I kind of want to go a little bit deeper into this, and I think that I want to apply it more individually and personally to my life, send me a message and I will give you a free consultation, and we'll talk about individual coaching packages, because that is really where you're going to get deep and huge life change. So the 4 C's of communication. The first one is confidence. Confidence can sound like a tricky one, because you might be thinking in your head right now, but I'm not very confident. How do I do that? Right? So just stop what you're doing for a moment. And if you have anything in your hands, just put it down. And if it feels right to you, close your eyes and just start to notice your breath. Notice if it's slow. Notice if it's deep or shallow. You don't have to change it at all. Just notice what it's like. Begin to feel the surface underneath you. Feel your feet. Feel your knees. Feel your hips. Imagine your breath filling your spine and your energy coming up your back into your neck and being exhaled. Feel your head. Really get into your body. And as you breathe, you relax. And as you relax, you breathe. Shift your focus into your imagination and allow yourself to go into the future and observe yourself after you have learned all of the very best communication skills, after you have learned that you are the coolest person in the world, that you are talented, that you are intelligent, that you are kind, that you are a fantastic spouse, that you are a loving mother, that you are a really fun and supportive friend and daughter and son, that everyone in your life is so grateful for you, and you're just really the very best version of yourself. Notice how that person carries their body and their posture. Notice what that person thinks, what they might eat, what they might do for a hobby. Notice what their favorite smell is. Notice what kind of music they like to listen to. And just really spend some time thinking about that person who is so confident in who they are and what they want, that they love themselves so fiercely that it's easy for them to love the people around them in a healthy way, with healthy boundaries, with healthy communication. Breathe into that person. That's the person that you are. Allow your present self to walk into that image. Look at your future best, most confident self. Take 2 deep breaths together. And on your last exhale, imagine that you both take steps towards each other. And your future, most confident self starts to kind of get transparent, ghost-like. And you guys merge together and melt together as one person. Now, all of the messages, all of the wisdom, all of the confidence of that future self you have within you right now. Take one more deep breath. When you're ready, allow yourself to come back into your body. Feel your feet. Feel the surface beneath you. Feel your hips. Feel your breath. And take as much time as you need in the next 5 seconds and come back to the space and open your eyes. That's the person that you want to communicate from. You want to have confidence from. And any time that you know you might be having a difficult communication or conversation, close your eyes and just spend 5 seconds visiting that person and put yourself in their body and ask yourself, what would they say and what would they do? And really become them. Okay? And the reason why confidence is important is because if I sound uncomfortable, the person is going to know, right? You can tell when you're talking to someone and they're kind of unsure of themselves or maybe not sure of the conversation or the situation that's happening. And that makes us feel unsure of ourselves. And it makes us question if we're being supported or if we should be talking about things, not on purpose, but indirectly. And that could include our tone. So if I ask a question, if I say, okay, well, how are you really feeling about that? Even though you can't see me right now, you can hear that in my voice that I'm not comfortable. Are you going to be confident in answering somebody if that's the tone of voice that they're using? Probably not. Body language, if the person is fidgeting or their arms and legs are crossed or they're avoiding making eye contact with you, then you might feel like that person's not confident. And we don't usually want to confide and be honest and direct with people if they're avoiding us. The speed of our communication matters. So if I were talking to you right now this fast about communication and how important it is and what to do, it would be really hard for you to follow the conversation, and you would probably be like, wow, Sierra sounds really nervous right now and really not confident in what's going on. That was about as fast as I can talk. So it's okay to stop and to take a deep breath. And that's the alignment piece. If you need to allow space to come into your confident self and take a breath, that's okay. People will understand that. And you can let them know, I need just a moment to come into this space and be present with you. And they'll appreciate that, because we love it when people want to be present with us. Giving our time and our energy is the best gift that we can give. Okay? And the simple exercise is what we just did. You can give your best self a name if you want, or an archetype. My best self is labeled the Queen of Slay. And she is like so confident and so fiercely loving to herself and everyone around her that I repeatedly, dozens of times a day, I notice myself doubting myself or feeling that little inner critic in my head, and I pause and I say, what would the Queen of Slay do in this situation? What would she think right now? What would she say in this situation? How would the Queen of Slay be acting right now? And usually all of that self-doubt just disappears. And if I can spend more time of my life coming into alignment with that best, most confident version of myself, then that's who I really, truly am. And that's what we want to do in our communication. That's also going to really, really help in setting boundaries. We're not talking about boundaries today, but that's probably, if I could give you the number one thing that helps people set boundaries, it would be using this exercise and setting boundaries from the space of the most confident person that you are. So use that exercise at any point in time, and dozens of times a day if that's what you want to do. The next C is compassion. Compassion is important because we, especially in uncomfortable situations, we don't get anywhere if we cannot tap into being compassionate towards other people, right? And part of that is validation. Validation is an important, an incredibly crucial tool to communication because it diffuses defensiveness and anger and division. So if you are concerned, especially if you're having a difficult conversation that has to do with somebody else, they might feel insecure about it, they might feel shame about it, they might feel anger about it, who knows? And all of these emotions that go along with a difficult conversation can cause defensiveness. And it's not because of our it's not because of our communication, it's because of the stories that we already have in our heads. So if we're talking about something like abuse or something like finances even, maybe I feel a lot of shame about not being able to pay my bills this month, or barely riding on the edge. Maybe I was taught that adults always can pay their bills and that it's easy to just go to college and get a job, and then the rest of life I should be able to take care of myself from the moment I hit 18 because that's what my family said, or that's what the media told me, or that's what the movies told me, or that's what the culture I grew up in said, right? And especially when we're talking about abuse or adversity, all trauma includes shame and guilt, and not just for the person who was the victim or the survivor, but for everyone involved. And there's a million different ways that that could show up. And so defensiveness is a common response. So if we can validate someone first by letting them know that we see their value, that's what validation is, right? Letting someone know that we see their value, then they're not going to come back with defensiveness because you're letting them know that you appreciate them, that you see the value and the gifts that that person brings to the world. That's never going to make someone angry. And it takes away this idea that there's a right or a wrong in a situation, because there's never a right or a wrong. That's just a judgment call that we're making as humans and how our brains work, that things are right or wrong. There's never a black and white. And sometimes that's a lot easier said than done. There are a billion different solutions to every problem and every communication that we have with the world. And some of them might be better for those involved or worse for those involved, but none of them are right or wrong. So the things that we want to validate that create compassion could be the facts of the situation. So the fact is that I lost my job and I haven't been able to get a new one. And even though I've applied for several jobs, no one has hired me. That's a fact that I can validate. I can validate that I feel frustrated and overwhelmed and really stressed about the situation. I can acknowledge that. I can acknowledge that my opinion is that the job market sucks and I don't think that I'll be able to get a job where I live right now. I think that I might have to move into a different state. That's an opinion, right? That's not necessarily a fact, but that's my reality in this situation. So we can have compassion and validate that. And then we can validate that it's challenging or that it's difficult. And even if I don't agree that maybe I think that I lost my job because of my boss, but my partner thinks I lost my job because of my sassy attitude, validating my feelings that it feels crappy to not have a job, that I'm really concerned about my bills, that I think we might have to move, doesn't mean that we agree with the person. We do not have to agree with the person to have compassion, and we don't have to tell them that we don't agree, because that's not helpful. In our head, we might have this background voice that's saying, what the heck, this person is completely off their rocker. I don't think that any of this is true. They're being really negative, whatever that is. But it's not going to be helpful to interject that into the conversation or to communicate that. So we're going to work to validate the things that are facts, that are feelings, that are opinions and challenges, and then work to solve the problem. So imagining, another way to do this is to imagine what you might feel like if you have the same experience. So what do you feel like when you feel frustrated or angry or embarrassed? What does that feel like for you? Knowing that that will probably not be exactly the same for the other person, but at least you can tap into compassion or ask clarifying questions about what their experience is like to see if it is like yours. Okay? And again, if you guys have questions while I'm talking, type them into the comments so that I can answer them when I get through. The third C is clarity. Clarity, the first part of clarity is remembering and reminding yourself and anyone else involved in the communication, what is the goal here? So in the example of adversity, let's say, what is the goal of telling my family that I experienced childhood abuse? Is it that I want to ask them to come to counseling with me? Is it that I want them to acknowledge that it happened? Is it that I want to express my feelings and let them know that I have been mad about it? Or is it that I want to reach a point of forgiveness for myself by acknowledging that it happened? Okay, and so you can flat out say that to someone. You can say, this is the goal for this conversation. Do you have a different one? Or do we agree that this is part of it? And then as the conversation maybe takes a turn and suddenly now you're talking about what the specific abuse was, or the person has gotten defensive about their role about it, bring them back and say, hold on, I think we should pause, because I remember that we had this goal to figure out a way to just acknowledge what happened, and maybe we need a mediator if we want to talk about that other thing, but that's a different conversation, right? So the goal of this conversation is to figure out how I'm going to pay my electric bill because I lost my job, and now we're talking about why I lost my job, but that's not the goal. The goal of the conversation is to figure out how we're going to pay the electric bill. So those are two examples, one about finance, one about adversity or abuse. Practice noticing vague language. So if I said, I'm really upset that I lost my job, I'm really upset that we can't pay our bills, that's a little bit vague. So what does upset look like for you? How is that feeling? Or what bill are you upset about? So anytime we use vague language, what happens is our brain is going to complete the story. If I say to you, oh, I went to this concert and it was outside and it was amazing and it was an amazing day out and the music was perfect and I was really enjoying it and the best people came with me. There's several things that now you've imagined in your head and filled in. You filled in the weather for the day because I told you it was amazing. So if you love sun, it was a sunny day in your head. If you think that being overcast so that the sun's not in your eyes during a concert is perfect, that's what you imagined right now. If you love being at a concert outside with grass, that's what you imagined. If you love being at Red Rocks, that's what you imagined right now. Right? You imagined that the music was perfect. So for some of you, it was death metal. For some of you, it was country. For some of you, it was rap. For some of you, it was funk, right? Whatever music you like, you immediately filled in those stories because I used really vague language. So we always want to ask questions. And you can say, just to clarify, what did you mean by, and then repeat what the person said. And the goal here is to really, if you think you're over communicating, you're probably doing it right or effectively. And the reason is because we know what we mean in our head, right? I know exactly what the concert was like and what the weather was like and what the people were like who were there. So I think that I just communicated really well about what the concert was like. Like, of course it was electronic music, and of course it was at night, and there were stars out, and the moon was full, and that's what I meant by the weather. And of course I meant the best people, as in the people that I go to kickboxing with because I love them. But that was a completely different story than probably you. So we want to be as specific as possible and really over communicate anything that we're trying to say. And the last C is consistence. So the first part of this is when you are on the receiving end, if someone says something that's helpful or does something that's helpful, tell them like 3 times. Hey, when you asked for my permission to share that story with my sister, that was really helpful that you got my permission first, especially when it's a family issue. Hey, I was really trusting you when I told you that story, and when you asked my permission before you told Dad, I really appreciate that, and I feel really trusting with you right now. So let the people know that you appreciated what they did. Then they know exactly what it looks like, exactly what your boundary is, and then they have like a blueprint to go from. When you asked me if I wanted support or if I wanted to brainstorm solutions, I felt really supported because you were asking me what I wanted in the conversation. Thank you for doing that. When you asked me what my life was like, I felt like you were really interested in my friends and my relationships and my work. Thank you for doing that. So be really specific about letting people know that was the way I wanted to be treated. Thank you. Keep doing it more. When you are on the giving end, decide what you're willing to do for the person and follow through. So if I am one day willing to have a conversation about a difficult topic to support my friend who just got in a car accident, let's say, and I'm willing to listen to things that are maybe difficult and let her know that I'm there for her, then I need to be willing to communicate that again in the future. Even if it's, I don't have time right now, but I'm willing to talk to you about it tomorrow when I do have time at 5 o'clock or whatever, then you're giving consistent support. If I am willing to give you a ride to the rehab facility when I am not working or on my lunch break, in the future, if I have time or it's my lunch break, I'm also willing to do that. Because what happens when we're not consistent is people don't know what to expect. And that creates a lot of anxiety. It's kind of like that one-timer thing where you're like, well, I mean, she gave me a ride that one time, but now she doesn't want to. So what did I do that one time that made her not want to support me now? Right? And if you tell someone that you're going to do something, then you better follow through. If you say, I'm going to call you at noon because you just texted me and told me that you were in a car accident and you need some support, then you better be texting at noon. Especially the more uncomfortable the conversation is, the more that person is going to feel more comfortable, because when things happen as we expect them to, we feel more comfortable. We feel more reliable. That's what's going to help our communication. And give the same communication each time, more or less. Meaning, if I set a boundary that I can't talk to someone when they're drinking because I know that they have told me they're having issues with alcohol or drugs, and they call me or I meet them for dinner and they've been drinking, then I need to be really clear. Hey, remember we talked about that I'm not willing to hang out right now, unless you're sober and you're not, and so maybe we can try this again later or in the future. Some of that is a boundary, and some of that is so that that person knows what to expect. Now in the future, if that person is under the influence, they know that you're not going to want to hang out with them, and you're going to set that boundary, and that will make it easier for you to communicate. They're not going to be as defensive. They're not going to be shocked or manipulative in the situation, right? Because you are letting them know, and they're used to it because you've said it in the past. Okay? So those are the 4 C's. We'll go through them one more time. So confidence, compassion, clarity, and consistency. If you are all 4 of those things when you're communicating, it doesn't even matter if you say the wrong thing. You're going to be communicating a billion times better than the majority of people in the United States. That's not factual. I can't prove that. But that is my belief. All right. I'm going to check on questions and comments here. And then, oh, it kicked me out. And then we'll move on to the 5 steps. Okay. Okay, 5 steps of communication. Number 1, make sure there's no immediate harm or emergency. Number 2, shut up and listen. Number 3, validate feelings. Number 4, feel the I don't know and offer support. And number 5, ask questions. And we're going to go through this step by step. And if there's a specific situation that you want to talk about with these 5 steps, put it in the comments right now so that I can have it. So number 1, make sure there's no immediate harm or emergency. Some of you may have done mental health first aid with me, and we've talked about this a lot. Others have not. So if someone is under the influence of a substance, the risk is going to be higher. So obviously, if they are doing something like driving, or if they're in a place that's not safe, you're just not going to have a further conversation. That's a time that you either need to be calling emergency services, or a time that you need to just act so that that immediate harm or danger can be gone. And then later, you're going to be having a conversation or a communication about it that may or may not be uncomfortable. If the person is harming themselves or potentially harming other people, you should be calling emergency services. Don't be a superhero and go in and put yourself in danger, because then suddenly everyone's in danger, right? If the person is possibly suicidal, or if you're not sure, please practice asking that question. Are you feeling suicidal? Are you thinking of killing yourself? It needs to be direct. It's not, are you thinking of harming yourself? It's, are you thinking of killing yourself? If the environment is dangerous for that person because of the people, because of the actual physical environment, and the people involved. So if any of these things, if you think that there's immediate harm happening, that's not the time to have communication. And the person is not, because they're going to be in the stress mode, their brain is not going to be able to access the parts that we need to communicate well and problem solve and be articulate and calm down. They're going to be in a crisis mode. So that's not a time to communicate. So that's why that's number 1, is make sure that there's no immediate harm. Number 2, shut up and listen. So a lot of times, especially when we're uncomfortable, we're thinking, well, what should I be saying right now? What should I be doing right now? How am I going to respond to this? Oh my gosh, now they're telling me about the time that they were on the bus and someone stole their watch at gunpoint. What am I going to say to this? And if I'm thinking that in my head, how am I going to respond? I can't really pay attention to what's going on in front of me, right? So you don't need to know how you're going to respond. And in fact, it's better if you don't. You need to be imagining, do I understand what this person is talking about? And that's how you're going to get to clarifying question if you realize you don't understand, not how am I going to respond to this? And the second part of that is it's okay to pause before you respond. And I know that I've said this a couple times already, but it's okay to take a deep breath and get into that. Beth, I see your comment. I'm going to get to it in just a second. So it's okay to take a deep breath, to say, give me just half a second, and then respond. And the reason for that, and I can talk to you about brain science and stress for days at a time as well, but the reason for that is if I am trying to respond from a state of stress and, oh my gosh, am I going to say the wrong thing? Am I going to do the wrong thing? Am I going to harm this person if I say this or that? Do I sound judgmental? All of these questions that come from a state of stress, then I'm not going to be communicating and problem solving at my best, because it's almost impossible for me to access the part of my brain that I need to be able to respond and communicate well if I'm in that space of stress. So feeling the pause, coming into your body, taking a deep breath, that's what's going to help you respond better. It's okay to take a pause. I think a lot of times in our culture, we feel so busy and like we can't slow down or we can't stop, or like we're being rude in a conversation if we take time. Because if you count how many times we interrupt each other every day, it's exhausting. I don't think I can count that high. So it's okay to say, give me just a second, I'm going to take a deep breath and respond to you, because I want to be clear and I want the intention of being present with you. People will be okay with that. Okay, Beth says, communication topic, telling my parents about the abuse I suffered as a child in order to move forward in my healing process, not keeping the secret anymore. Okay, so again, today we're coming from the side of supporting people when you are having an uncomfortable conversation. So even though this topic could be about us, we can use our communication style to support the other people within the conversation. So let's back up a little bit. So there's no immediate harm here, at least that we know of. You can listen to the people's response. So if I say, this was my experience as a child, and very clearly state, why are you saying this? I'm saying this because it's bothering me a lot. I spend a lot of time thinking about it. There's a lot of stress and anxiety that I experience, and I'm tired of living my life that way, and I think I deserve better. I want to be able to move forward in my healing process, and keeping a secret isn't working for me. So I need everybody to know this. Okay? That way, it's very clear. And if someone responds in a way that is maybe defensive or blaming, you can come back and say, remember, the purpose of my communication is just so that everyone understands that this is my experience and it belongs to me and nobody else. And so I just want you guys to understand that this is how it felt for me and this is what it was like. And that's it, period. And part of that is not accepting that projection. So from the style number 1, the projector, well, I remember it being this way, and acknowledging and validating, okay, I hear that was your experience, and I'm also sharing my experience right now. If you want to get together and talk again about your experience, I'm willing to do that. If you're willing to do that. If you're not willing to do that, don't say that, okay? So if we want to be heard, we need to be listening to other people and allow them to respond to you, because what they say might surprise you. They might start a sentence and you think you know what the end is going to be like, and maybe you don't. Number 3 is validate feelings. So we talked a little bit about that just now, saying, I hear that was your experience, and right now I'm sharing mine. let's talk about yours later on, or when I am in a space to be able to do that, or whatever that is for you, whatever the boundary is for you. So letting someone know that you hear them. I hear that it's frustrating that you lost your job, and I'm repeating exactly what that person has said to me. I hear that you're worried about paying the bills. That sounds stressful. That sounds challenging. That sounds exciting. I hear that your experience of our childhood was different than mine, and that's okay with me. I'm okay with that. And I would like to finish saying what mine was before we move on to talking about what it was like for other people. Okay, so hopefully those phrases are helpful in this situation that we're talking about. Number 4 is feel that I don't know and offer support. So a lot of times what holds us up in our communication is that we don't know what to say. And especially at the beginning when you're practicing these skills, you might not know what to say. And that's completely 100% okay and very common. So I'm going to tell you the easiest trick that we never think of in communicating is saying the words, I don't know what to say right now. It's completely okay, and people will understand, and they won't be offended, and they won't feel, in fact, they'll probably feel more comfortable that you're willing to say, I don't know what to say right now, or I don't know the answer, and I'm willing to figure it out. So there's 3 phrases here that you can use, that you can write down and specifically use until you figure out what vocabulary works for you and your style and your personality. I don't know what that would feel like for me, or I don't know what that would feel like, and I'm really glad that you told me. So thank you for coming and telling me. So not only are you saying, I don't know what this feels like for you, but I'm willing to support you without directly saying that. I don't know what to say right now, and I'm willing to figure this out with you, if you're willing to figure it out with them, right? And asking them very specifically, what type of support would you like from me? So this is figuring out what is it that person wants right now? What is the boundary for them right now? And at the bottom there are ideas of what types of support might be helpful, because a lot of times if you ask what type of support someone wants, they won't know what to say, because we don't talk about what types of support there are. Or if we feel stuck, especially in a difficult conversation that feels hard for us, we won't know what we want, or it'll be hard to come up with at the moment. So types of support might be that they just want to be listened to or heard. And so that's your job, is just to listen and to validate what they're saying. That's it. They might want help brainstorming solutions for how to fix the problem that they have, which is only a problem if they define it as one, right? They might need help brainstorming resources, and that could be resources that they have internally. It could be values, it could be strengths that they have, it could be community resources, people that you can reach out to, it could be phone numbers you can use, it could be friends or services that you're aware of, or it could be practical help. Your car broke down, I drive right past you on my way to work. Would you like a ride Monday, Wednesday, Friday when I'm able to do that? Or I hear that you need to go to the store to get some food. Can I drive you there? Or you lost your job, you can't pay your electric bill. I'm willing to lend you money, and I can do that. Would you like that help? So practical help is like direct help that can move the situation along, right? So when you are having a difficult conversation with your family, maybe about adversity, it's really important. And part of this is, it's important because you want to model how you want other people to communicate with you. So if I'm telling my family about abuse that I experienced, I'm going to be using the phrases that I want them to be using back to me. I don't know what it would feel like as a parent to be told that your child experienced abuse in this way, but I'm willing to hear about it from you. I don't know what to say right now about the guilt that you're expressing as my parent, but I have some numbers to some professionals that know a lot more about this than I do, and if you want them, I would be willing to give them to you. Okay. Part of your situation, Beth, that's a little bit tricky is that it's not your job to support your family members. When it's something that is adversity or abuse and you are communicating with either the person who abused you or the people who were around you, you are like, if it was like a bullet point or a target, you're in the middle. You are the most important person. It is about you. So it's up to you how much you want to offer support, and be really careful. Is it healthy for you to be offering this support? Or do you need to say, I need to focus on me right now, but there are some other people that can support you. If you want their numbers, I can give them to you, and then let it go. Okay. And the last thing is ask questions. Asking questions does a few different things. The first is you're clarifying, and we've talked about this already, but you're clarifying what the person actually means, so that any of the stories or the vagueness that is going on, you are getting a clearer picture. Oh, that person actually didn't mean that they couldn't pay the electric bill. They meant that they couldn't pay their cell phone bill and were worried that their phone would be turned off. And then when they did get a job, that they wouldn't be able to have that communication. Okay. Or, oh, when they were talking about being at the concert, they were actually there in the dark and the stars were out. They weren't there in the middle of the day and it was really sunny, right? And the second thing you're doing is you're letting that person know that you're interested and that you care about them. When people ask me questions, I feel like excited to tell them more, and especially if it's a difficult conversation that we feel shame or guilt about, asking questions is really important, because people are going to give you maybe like, they're going to like test the waters first. They're going to say something like indirectly like, oh, yeah, I had a really tough day at work. And then once you start asking questions, actually I had a tough day at work because I got fired, right? And so if we don't act interested or let them know that they're important to us, then they're probably going to skip over completely all those really important pieces, because having a hard day at work and getting fired are two very drastically different things. Beth says I needed to hear that. Great, good, I'm glad. So questions that you might ask people are, how do you feel about the situation? What was this part of it like for you? How can I love you better? Or how can I support you better, depending on your relationship? Do you mean to say blah, 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 blah? Do you mean to say that your boss was verbally abusive? Do you mean to say that your boss yelled at you when you said that she raised her voice or whatever, right? Is it accurate that you're saying, and then I describe how I understood it, and that way I know, am I understanding this correctly or not? Which is really important, especially in uncomfortable conversations. Okay, so we are clarifying and also validating that we're interested in what's going on. There's little pieces that I'm not going to go into today because it would take forever. But for example, asking someone how they feel about it, getting someone to actually label the emotion that they're feeling physiologically changes the way that they are responding to the situation. So if I have not decided how I feel about a situation, I might have a lot of anxiety or confusion chemically, hormonally, physiologically in my body, because when we label an emotion, that tells our limbic system what kind of hormones and peptides to release, which tells our body how to respond. So for example, if I feel immediate danger, my body's going to respond by fighting or running away or freezing if it's a chronic condition. In the animal kingdom, maybe that would be playing dead or camouflage, right? So it's important that we know that. If I say I'm feeling distress or depression, my body might start crying, and my body needs to do that. It's a physical form of releasing the chemicals and the energy that is traveling through my body. So some of these reasons why we ask questions and dig deeper is because we're helping the person process through. And you don't have to know that. You don't have to know all of the science behind this at all. You just know that asking questions like the ones on the screen are important, okay? Okay. So if you have questions about anything that we've just talked about, type them into the comments, and I want to know. They can be specific questions about something you are going through. They can be general questions about things that weren't clear, and they can be about any of these things. So about the communication styles that don't work, about the 4 C's, or about the 5 steps. And while you guys are typing that, I'm going to talk briefly about coaching, and then I'm going to show my face, which just looks like my normal face, but you haven't seen it yet. And who knows with me. So individual coaching programs, I put together 30, 60, or 120-day programs. For beginners, I recommend the 30-day package. It is 4 coaching sessions, so you get 1 a week for a month. So it's a little bit more intensive, but if you have something that you really want to work through, it is the best way to see the most change in the most effective way. And I work with and for amazing people who feel like they're having emotional blocks that stop them from hitting their goals. It could be abuse or trauma or adversity. It also could be that you don't know why. You just know that there is something blocking you, okay? These people have bigger visions of where they want to go, and they might need some clarity or some specific steps to move forward. And just so you know, even if you are feeling this way in your life, you can know without a doubt who you are without feeling shameful. You can have the freedom to choose what you want without feeling guilty, and you can experience fulfillment in your life with a purpose and enjoy with pleasure all of the things that you're doing. I think we're not told that enough. So all of those things are possible, and you deserve them, okay?